Hey, this is Jaryd Krause, host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And in this episode, I'm speaking with Charley Valher from Valher Media. And he also helps people scale his podcast with that media company and has been successful in multiple online businesses himself. But in this episode, Charley and I talk about the risk that is involved when buying a website business and also owning and running an online business, and how most of us get really excited when we buy our first website or we buy a website altogether by the number or the amount of money it's making, and we forget about the risk that's involved, or we just actually don't even see it. It's the same when we're running a business. We tend to focus on what's working and what's growing and optimize that and leave what risks may be lurking completely out of the picture, or we may not even know that they're there. Charley and I talk about two mistakes he made by being susceptible to risk and how he found out after some occurrence that happened that damaged himself and the business, and then also two mistakes that I made in business with risk as well. And we talk about those mistakes that we made and how we can minimize risk in both those examples and how people can do that in various different business models as well. For example, Amazon, when Amazon associates cut their commissions, what you can do instead to get better commissions somewhere else, or what you can do to minimize your risk or remove that risk completely. Also being reliant on suppliers and different ad accounts. So this is not just related to content sites, but also all sites like SaaS sites, e-commerce sites, all different types of businesses. We talk about different risks that are involved, how to remove those, and how to minimize them if they can't be removed. So it's a very powerful episode that not too many people actually talk about in the online business space. So strap yourself in, get ready, and enjoy. Today's episode is brought to you by Investors Club. Investors Club is a marketplace for serious buyers interested in proven businesses that aren't listed anywhere else. There is a free membership where you can get access to 14-day-old listings and can purchase due diligence reports for $47 each. Or if you become a paid member, you can get instant access to every single listing, unlimited due diligence reports, no fee escrow services, access to exclusive offers from Investor Club partners, and priority support. Now, sellers do sign a 2-month exclusivity agreement to only list with Investors Club. There are no purchase fees or commission, meaning the seller nor the buyer ever pay commission in any deal. And every due diligence report provides next level metrics to make sure due diligence is far less time consuming, making it quicker for you to seal the deal. Also, Investors Club have a great Q&A support available both for buyers and sellers. I'm a full member myself personally, and a lot of thought and effort has gone into this service. However, there are a limited amount of seats for this membership, so go and check them out at that URL, investors.club. That is investors.club. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And also, Charley, welcome back to the Buying Online Businesses podcast for you too. It's great to have you here, and thank you.
Well, as you told me prior to recording this episode, I am the record holder for guest appearances on this podcast, a title I hope to maintain, by the way. So anyone out there, feel free to come at it. I will be here. So thank you for having me on the show once again, Jaryd.
Oh, you set the challenge. You might have to get some other people on more frequently, but I'm sure that you'll hold the title for a long time, probably forever.
Actually, I just got to say one thing. Do you know what's actually really upsetting from my point of view? Like, I have a podcast, right? And routinely, I actually get more people reaching out from our podcast episodes talking about the things we talk about on this show than my own. So I've actually had more people reach out to me and say, hey, that was a great episode on LinkedIn from our work and our episodes together than any others. So check out the prior ones. Anyway, over to the show.
Yeah, most of the prior ones are the start of the podcast as well. And they're very good because if you are just starting out and this is your first episode or second or third episode you're listening to, the prior episodes at the start of this, and a lot of people before they even become clients or they just find me in the podcast, is they go through that journey of like knowing nothing and then starting to learn so much more, because those first few episodes are really foundational pieces for learning, just getting into this. But Charley, thanks again for jumping on. Today, we're going to be talking about something a little bit more advanced for people that are just starting or don't own a business, but also going to be great for people that are looking to buy business so they're not caught out with risks. We're going to be talking about risks. And I've put myself in many risky positions, some of which I'm not going to explain on this podcast because they might be a little bit too personal, but also some business risks as well, which is what we're going to be talking about. And the reason being is because I feel that a lot of people get quite excited, Charlie, about jumping into this space, and like they see the numbers and they're like, wow, they look at Empire Flippers and F International, Quite Light Brokerage, Invested Clubs, all these different brokers, and they see how much a business is, how much it's making, and they get wowed over and they just go in to buy a business, and they may not really pick apart or understand the risks. So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode.
It's a great topic. I'm in.
Mainly, like the last time I spoke, or last episode I spoke with James Shremko on Own the Racecourse, mutual friends, obviously. You know a lot about the OTR concept, and that's, predominantly sales and traffic and marketing funnels and sources, that we shouldn't be so dependent on those. In this instance, we're going to be talking predominantly about risk of being in business, risk that we may not see that aren't involved with getting sales and marketing and traffic. So I want to open it up to you. I've got 2 points that I want to talk about, two times that I have made some doozy mistakes in business, in online business. And I want to hear 2 from you, and we'll pick those apart so people can understand what risks may evolve, because a lot of people are listening is like, well, they buy a website and they just don't know these risks are there. They don't even know they're possible because they're so focused on, as a business owner, what's working, let's optimize it to make that work better. And that's where their focus stays, right, Charlie? I know I've done that. I have no doubt that you've done that as well. And we just go, this is working really well, I'm going to focus on it. And they forget where we could be susceptible to risks. Have you been in that position?
Today? Or this is such a huge thing. This is a neglected topic, by the way. So I'll preface this conversation in a few ways. Risk is something I don't think gets talked about enough. Marketing and sales and SEO and traffic and conversion rates are the sexy topics that people want to know more about, where like risk and finances and hedging and all that type of stuff is often ignored because it, in all honesty, doesn't do as well in converting sales. So that's a big reason these topics don't get talked about. The other side of it is, for much of my own career, I always went with this attitude of like, I'll worry about risk when I've got something that's could be a loss that's, worth risking. Like, I'm just trying to, pay my bills, like mitigating risk. Like, that's not the issue here. If I'm making sales, then I'll worry about it. So I think for anyone starting out, risk is something we're not really trying to pay attention to. We're more just looking at like, how do we get something to work? And then as you build your business and you take on more things, risk becomes just a bigger and bigger part of the conversation. And even to this point right now is like when I had 2 team members, so 2 staff, versus when I had 20 staff or 50 staff, my tolerance to risk greatly changed. So I think something to identify, and like something I wish to pass on in this episode, is your relationship with risk will change dramatically as you get deeper into this and you establish more skills from there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like when you're starting out, then you just need to get some runs on the board before you worry about like what angle I'm going to get tackled from and all that sort of stuff. And most people are listening are looking at buying something that already has multiple runs on the board anyway. That's why I find it such an important subject, because there's the runs on the board. Even just buying a business and not optimizing it and removing risk, some people don't understand that can add value to the business. Like when I look at a business for sale, I'm really looking at the risks more so than anything. And the ones that have the least amount of risk have a high multiple. So even if you were to do that as a flipping strategy, which some people on here may be doing so, you buy a business, minimize some risks without growing the average monthly revenue, is you can add more value to the business just by doing so. So tell me one time that you put yourself at risk or been at risk and you realized after the fact, oh crap, what have I just done? And you've tried to scurry around and fix it.
So this is what I'll call a $100,000 mistake. $100,000 risk neglect is the way I look at it. This is going back quite a few years in my journey. I had a reasonably successful marketing agency, and I came up with this genius idea that we would get into apps, so mobile apps. So we were already selling services to businesses. And the idea was, well, if we could sell them an app as well, this is a great upsell. And sure enough, I went to a client and I sold it. we sold an app, and we sold that app at a very reasonable price. And you got to remember, at this time, like, apps were huge. This was the thing to be looking at.
$200 or $300 to start an app, you could sell for like $2,000 or something like that, right?
Well, it was playing in a much bigger sphere. So the app we sold, we were selling for $50,000, and it was a massive custom development. We were building some very high caliber stuff, which was awesome. It wasn't like the app platforms or anything like that, which I know are more common today. I didn't even think they were around at that point. Anyway, we sold this app and I was like, over the moon, right? This is a huge, big sale. There was one big problem though, is that we didn't have anyone on the team that could build an app. So we went out and we hired someone to build an app. So we decided, rather than bringing someone into the company and having them work in-house, we'll partner with someone who's making apps, and they can make the app, and then we will on-sell it. And that's how we're going to make our margin. So we sold the app for $50,000, and we're going to pay this person $25,000. We were going to make a nice profit on the sale, and rinse and repeat. Let's just keep doing this. It sounds like a great business model. Where things got hairy though, is that it turns out that developer that we hired, or that company we hired, wasn't very good at making apps. What ended up happening, which is I'm not very proud about at this time, and like obviously a little bit embarrassed and since learned a big lesson from, is we spent our money developing the app with this person. We didn't have any idea they were doing a terrible job because we weren't app developers. And then it got to the point where the app wasn't usable or functionable to the client's expectations, and we had to refund the entire project. So I just want to paint this picture of like, we'd taken $50,000 from the client, spent that money building the app and rebuilding the app and trying to make that work. So we blew out the budget on building it to $50,000, then had to refund the $50,000. So if you imagine, instead of just losing $50,000, we actually lost $100,000. I had to give the client money back, and I'd spent the $50,000 with this development house. So a huge entanglement. Like, luckily at the end of the day, it was all okay. The client was not happy, but not worse off. And then we learned a very big, important thing there. So this whole round circle, and just, it's embarrassing negligence. Even as I say it, it sounds dumb. And it's like, in my mind now, it's so obvious how much risk we had taken on. But I don't know if it was that I thought I was invincible, that we were just winning and like, how could this go wrong? But this is when we took on way too much risk and just a huge hit to the company.
Well, if you think about it, when it's a logical decision, you've just made $50K, you spend something to deliver that product, it makes sense that it should work. Obviously, we forget, like, we're so optimistic or over optimistic that we forget that these things could happen and can really stuff us up. For example, that's not just a monetary mistake. The way I see it, more importantly, is it's a stressful mistake, and you've just gone away and put a massive stress load on yourself, on your team, and stretched yourself and stretch others in places that maybe shouldn't have been stretching, and caused a lot of pain. Maybe, I don't know whether in the organization, but certainly within yourself. And I've done that myself too. And I think that's really important for people to get, is that because it's not just about money, it's also about our livelihoods and how much better off we are. I don't know about you, Charlie, but I got into business initially to have a stress-free life. And I think most people are doing the same thing.
It was not wise. And I think if you wanted to break this down even a little bit more in depth, like, I mean, just how obvious does this sound? If you're thinking about building or selling apps, maybe make a couple first, test out the company and see that they're good to work with and can deliver. Like, how huge a mistake it was not testing suppliers or partners out prior to this, or us getting a deeper understanding of apps so we could recognize they were doing the wrong thing early rather than turning to a big thing. So like, so many things I look at now in hindsight, and just like the risk profile in that situation was just crazy.
Even to the point of you knowing somebody that creates apps and has case studies of doing the same thing for another person and having success within it. And then you just modeling off the mistakes that they did the first time, where they did have a successful case study, and you could use them again. I know that when people listen to my podcast, they're like, oh, I'm going to buy a business and I want to get some help through the membership or the community, the Bob community. The thing that they consume the most, Charlie, is the case studies, to be like, is this going to work for me? Like, has he done it for other people? And I think that's just a good risk minimization strategy as well. Like, when you're coming into finding suppliers and and different affiliates or addict ads and all these different things that we can bolt onto our site to help us grow in our business, is check out those case studies. Like, has it worked for other people? If so, how? And that could have helped a lot. There's so many things that we could nitpick at, right, on all the different ways you could have made mistakes. But at the end of the day, the best thing that came from it is that you learned from it.
It's funny, what do they say? The most expensive lessons you tend to learn the best. Since that, it's fascinating that I look at my own journey and I've become incredibly biased towards in-house teams. So we don't partner with companies like that. If we were going to deliver big projects like that, we would do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's to avoid future onsets like that. But just into that, it's like, this is one of the things that makes buying online businesses such a beautiful thing, is that you can avoid so much of the risk I took on in that example, because when you're doing your due diligence, you can see that, oh, no, this business has made a sale doing this. There's proof in the transactions, in the data of like, no, they have successfully been able to overcome this already. They're not trying to start an app company, Jaryd.
All right, so no apps for Charley. Let's just steer clear of that.
Never again.
So I've made a doozy myself. Is I bought a business and we were selling a certain product and we were drop shipping these products. I had the business for a couple of years. At this stage, I was enjoying my life, traveling around the world, not worrying about what risks there actually were because I didn't even know they were there this time. And what happened was, I'm selling this product, I'm selling multiple products, but we had this popular product, this most popular product. One of the suppliers just decided, nah, we're not making enough money selling this product. We're just going to stop it. We're just going to discontinue this whole range and we're not going to stock it. And I was selling probably 30 to 40% of my sales were from this product. So I just lost 30 to 40% of my sales for this short time period that I had to scurry around and try and make it work to get this product again, either from another supplier or myself directly. And this is what I think is really scary when people come into buying a business. They may see, okay, cool, there's just one supplier. And what happens if that one supplier gets wiped out? Like your whole business gets wiped out. For example, I have another business where we design custom products for people, personalized products for people. What happens if they go completely belly up? Like, I need to have a backup of somebody else that can create those same custom products at the same rate and the same quality. So I have that backup. So I learned in my previous business from one of my other existing businesses that I need to remove that risk of only a certain amount of suppliers. And it comes back to not just suppliers, but it's so fascinating to see and sit on the sidelines of this Amazon debacle that happened a few months ago, as we've publishing this probably a couple of weeks from when we were recording, Charley, but it's still been about a month since Amazon had changed their commission structure for affiliates, and from like 8% down to 3%. People lost so much of their business, like 60% of their business, but they didn't think maybe that's a risk when I'm buying this business.
Do you know what's so interesting here? There's actually a couple of things. First off, right, all the major affiliates I know don't use Amazon anyway. So it's like, I'm not seeing what the big deal is. Like, go find proper suppliers, work with them directly, do some cool stuff. Like, it's not the end of the world there. But the other thing, what I find really fascinating in your example of what you said is like awareness of the risk. How many people were walking around going, do you know what, this Amazon thing could end? Or this one product, this dropship is not going to be there. Or, this app guy, he's got it nailed. So it seems like there's this common thread with like getting exposed is the awareness to the risks, or actually like creating something to that. And I think it's really interesting that it's only in hindsight that we value having other people identify risk for us. And I think it's a really unique benefit from being in something like your community, is that you can absolutely go, well, hang on, you need two suppliers.
This is the main reason that people join, Charley, is like, buying a business is good. Can you do it yourself? Of course. Can you buy a great business yourself? Of course. But you can still buy a good business and you still buy a great business without my help or anybody's help. But do you know, like, what happens if things go belly up? Do you have somebody that goes and rectifies before you purchase something that, hey, this is a possibility? So I even said this, like, I had a client that purchased business that had Amazon associates attached to it. And beforehand, I always weigh up what the risks are, what the opportunities are, and the next steps after I do a due diligence review. And mention the risks. And then I also, after I mention the risks, I give them alternatives on what they can do to remove those risks or at least minimize them. And some people are like, yep, cool, I understand that, that's all good. As soon as I buy this business, I'll put those strategies into place to remove them. But sometimes, you can still buy the business and the SEO algorithm might change within like a week or 2 weeks. Or the Amazon Associates thing might go belly up within a week or 2 weeks. What happens if you don't have somebody on your side, like yourself or myself, where you go, well, hang on, we have affiliate relationships directly with partners. And we don't just have one, we have multiple ones. And the reason we do it with partners, because 8% commission at best for Amazon sucks when we could get 20% directly through an affiliate partnership that we set up anyway. Plus, we got 5 of them. So if one goes, we're okay here. So identifying it's one thing and then rectifying is a totally different thing, I feel.
Yeah, I've never viewed it from this perspective before, but it's like having those people around you is almost an insurance policy to solve these things when they come up. And it's like Amazon Associates is the one at the moment, but I remember before this, it was an SEO update or Penguin or Panda or whichever ones. And then before, Cambridge Analytica was the issue, or it was VAT, or it was GDPR. And what I kind of look at that's interesting is like, since I've been in business, these things have been happening. So what's the likelihood they're going to continue to happen? Like, surely we just recognize these curveballs are going to keep coming our way, and it's getting good at putting things in place to make sure it doesn't become a regular theme that you get hit hard.
And the more you're around and watching these curveballs, the better you get at identifying. I know that you speak to a lot of business owners. I see so many business on the daily occurrence, and I just see these curveballs coming left, right, and center. It's kind of like I need to teach people to do some Neo tricks from the Matrix before they buy a site, or if they're going to buy a site. But I'm interested, Charlie, we've still had our journey. Before we could identify these, we still had our journey of making errors. We still make them on a daily occurrence, right? I do, I'm a human being. I've got another story for everybody and for you that I want to tell shortly, but I want to hear one more of yours before I share mine, if that's cool.
Yeah, let's do the back and forth. We'll do the back and forth. I think it's fascinating it's even interesting listening to your recollection of the risk and how you think about it today. And I'd be curious to know, it seems to have affected your thinking going forward, which is a good thing. In the example of the supplier you had here, has this meant that going forward you've always had multiple suppliers, or you only buy businesses with multiple suppliers? Did you take a lesson from that and put something in place to make sure it doesn't become a recurring theme?
Of course. I went and looked get the control of the business myself by purchasing them and putting them in a warehouse and distributing them myself. And that ended up being a more costly exercise than I could do as a dropshipper. And then I ended up getting a dropshipper to be able to get those products for me, so I didn't have to take the risk, which was great. But I always had a backup of different suppliers. Like, say if I wasn't going to use that supplier or they stopped selling those products or they went bankrupt or something like that, I'd already have a contact of the supplier there and just go, cool, plug in, ready to go. There may have been a transition period of like a day or 3 or something like that, maybe a week, worst case scenario, but I'm not going to be out of business in not selling any products for a big, long period of time. So always, and this is what I say to my clients as well, is like, have multiple suppliers on ads or backups for ads, or multiple for affiliates and backups for affiliates, and also for suppliers as well.
All right, I got a meaty one for you. All right, you ready for this one? All right. One of my earlier businesses was an eBay business. So I don't know if it's funny that all my stories seem to recollect around a certain time, like the time when apps were big. This is the time when eBay was big. And I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember when eBay was a thing? Like, it had first gotten big and like everyone was eBaying stuff. Like, it was almost used as a adjective and a noun.
Yeah. It was like Google, just Google it. It was like, just get it on eBay.
So one of the things that was really interesting is that when eBay kind of first happened in Australia, it didn't allow international selling. So what it meant is that if you listed an item on eBay in Australia, it had to be in Australia. And what this business revolved around is arbitrage. So a lot of what my business did is we would look for items that were internationally a lot cheaper. We would bring them to Australia and then sell them in Australia. And I thought I was genius. Like I distinctly remember, like I've cracked the code of like I was just doing a ton of arbitrage. We were just literally buying retail items in the US, shipping them to Australia in bulk, and then selling them on eBay for like 20, 30% margins. It was a great little business. The big issue became, though, is that the day came when international selling was allowed on eBay. And even if you get on eBay today, you can see that you can buy from anywhere, and China's listing things straight on eBay now. And basically the opportunity for that business model to exist evaporated overnight. So everything we were doing became unprofitable.
I look at that and it's kind of like when Uber came out for taxi drivers, just like so much of the market's just gone or it's just decimated. And that, how could you foresee that, Charlie? Like you may not know that's ever going to happen. Like, and you're like, well, this is awesome. I could do this for the next 5 years and just go and keep, purchasing these things and it'll be totally cool. Because why would eBay do that to me? Or, it'd be harder for people to sell those products from overseas and the shipping and all that sort of stuff. But I like to think about the platform that I'm using and what their next steps are to growth that's going to make it better for them. And will that cut me out along the process eventually? So it's kind of like in Amazon Associates, I've heard through the grapevine that, they're eventually going to be cutting from commissions from the whole cart to just one singular product that person refers to. And I don't know if that's taken place yet or is about to, but it makes sense that they would do that because why wouldn't they? It's going to make more money for Amazon. And that means that more money can help them grow. So I've got to think about what Amazon wants to do. And you need to think about what eBay would do. And it's easy for us to look at this in hindsight, but they're the things that I think when we're first starting out, we just don't even know exist.
Well, it brings back that awareness piece again. It's like, so much to your point, a few things here is like, one, I was acting as if things were going to stay the same when knowing now they never do. So it's like, I look at that and go, well, it was pretty obvious the writing was on the wall. It's just that my awareness to that wasn't there. If I look a little bit deeper though, I wonder how on the pulse I was with eBay. I think I was not paying attention. I think there was probably plenty of updates. I think there was notice. I think there was ways of understanding this was going to happen. And I think, using Amazon as the example here, I'm pretty certain someone knew about this before it happened. It wasn't a surprise announcement.
Probably the public, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other side of that is like, going forward, I'll tell you this right now is that I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon cut again. Like they're so big now. What do they need affiliates for? Where's the value creation of the affiliates? So in the old days, the value of the affiliates was driving the traffic. It's like, all right, we need everyone using Amazon. We'll do this to incentivize people making review videos and doing all that stuff, where it's like, they don't need that anymore. So what are you doing uniquely where you're applying value to this chain, or is the person just going to buy it on Amazon anyway?
It's identifying what's going to happen in the future on where each business is going to go and then how to grab opportunity of that, really, isn't it? Like problems are just opportunities in disguise. And I reiterate this to my members all the time. It's just like identify where the problems are and you can create an opportunity out of that if you are creative enough to do so.
Yeah, I love that point. I just want to go a little bit deeper before we get into your one. It's like, is everyone like not aware that it's like the greatest wealth transfers happen in disasters, not in the good times? So it's like every time these things happen, don't get me wrong, it's never fun. Like when you get a side hit, when a platform changes, when the associates get cut, like all these things from there. But to your point is it also presents like he who can adapt the fastest probably has a chance to accelerate faster than they would have if everything stayed the same. And I think we're going through a time like that at the moment with COVID. And this whole thing is that businesses that are adapting are going to probably explode versus those holding on to, no, everything will be back to the way it was.
Yeah, I agree. And one of my clients has already adapted in such a short amount of time just through some things that we talked about. And it just goes to show that there's other people are going to be, in the victim mentality rather than the victor mentality. Yeah, so let me share my last one, which is a pain point that just happened recently, Charlie. And what happened was there was an error with a software provider that I was using. Basically a SaaS company. It's similar to ClickFunnels. And I had all of my members area and my members portal where people would log in and got all the goodies, and that was down for a couple of days. And then also what was worse, well, probably not worse, sorry, what was just as bad was that my landing pages that I sent people to opt in for my lists and to join, and become members and stuff like that was down as well. So I couldn't make sales and I couldn't maintain or give the product or service that people had paid for.
Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah, it was so dumb. And I look at it now, I'm like, how could I have not thought of that? But I'm only human.
I just thought it's that same thing again. It's like after it's like, this is staring me in the face.
Yeah. So I hurried and frenzied around to try and get this working. And I was dealing with software providers that weren't getting to me at a reasonable time or not giving me the right support on the phone with GoDaddy and all these different things, sending name servers all which way. So I was confused. Every single person that I talked to was confused, even the developer, because I didn't know what I was talking about. It's not my area of expertise, right?
Ooh, tech risk. It's like tech risk is real, very real.
Yeah. So having somebody who knows that stuff is important and can guide you in the right way to do so, or at least paying for a service that can help you do that. But yeah, I needed to remove that risk, which is meant it was over the Sunday where it was Mother's Day, and I'm like, I need to get this fixed fast. Like I was so frustrated this period. And you came up with a suggestion. I bought a domain name and then I just changed the name servers over. Like your suggestion was like, you can't have this happening in the future. And you're right. So I bought this domain name and I was thinking maybe I'll just get this set up later as a risk minimization strategy later. Boom, I changed the name servers, changed it over, got onto the developing team to change everything over, and we'll back up and live straight away. Now, the good thing is that my two different domains are totally separate, which prevents risk as well. And there's still more things that could be risks involved within that itself that I'm going to remove. Like I'm going to have multiple opt-in pages and landing pages that can be created that are going to be backups in case something goes down. So I'm not in that same position again. But I look back and I just lost my whole business for a couple of days. And it was just a silly mistake that I didn't really think about because I was too busy creating content for people in the membership and free content and stuff like that. And we just optimize, we forget, we drop things off, we just optimize what's already working and we focus on that so heavily, and we forget that there's these other things or external forces that can happen that we may not understand.
It's such an interesting one and a painful one in this experience from here. It's frustrating, especially when you don't know how to act. With tech specifically though, and we could do a whole episode on Charley's tech risks and things that have blown up. The one thing that stands true to me is that isolation is worth a lot. So when you've got platforms laid on top of each other, in the experience you had here, where it's you've got GoDaddy here, a WordPress website here, another software here. It's like the more things you stack on top of each other, that risk amplifies. It really, really does. And I look at a lot of businesses now with the way they're kind of set up and I'm like, wow, it's only going to take one plugin to not get updated and the whole thing becomes fragile, where I think more and more about how do I make sure that if my site goes down, my members can still get access or my podcast still works. And that type of segmentation, I think, is worth a lot in this area.
Yeah. So that's what's important is really segmentation for your site. So if things crash or affiliate links die, that you can go away and replace them with other affiliate links from a different provider or different suppliers. So I think the risk through just singularity, I guess, is a good word for it, that it makes things riskier in business.
I'll share something here that I think about a lot with risk. And it's obviously very broad, but I think it's good. I think once or twice a year, you really have to sit down and really look at your risk. You have to actually actively go about going, what risks do I have? And then you're not actually the person to answer that. It's getting people that are further in the journey to help and go, what's going to break here? Because they have that awareness, you don't. If you knew, any of the ones you mentioned on this episode, Jaryd, if you knew about them, you would have done something about it. but it's that awareness piece. So external support, a huge one. Doing that once or twice a year externally, I think, is just such a valuable thing that people won't do, but they should. And I hope they do. Two is, this is one of those things where cash solves a lot of problems. So for me personally, think of the experience you just had. Imagine if you had bills due and you were relying on those payments in that time. It was frustrating enough, and the conversations we had, I could feel the frustration in the messages. I'm like, oh, wow, this sucks. But can you imagine that if you threw on financial pressure as well? So like buffers for your living expenses and businesses and team is a huge one as well. So 3 months buffer on every business, I think, is essential for just sleep at night factor in these scenarios. And then lastly is the whole idea of like, you can't have singularity. So you can't be relying on one traffic source, one team member, one software, one supplier. Like having an own the race course type view to these things, as James sort of mentioned in the previous episode, really, really is so much or so important when it comes to business and just removing risk from the situation.
I can't wrap that up any better. Instead, I just want to add something, and that is, you don't need to risk it to get the biscuit. Because it's so stupid. It's so dumb. It's something that I used to believe in, and people used to tell me, I was like, yeah, you just need to take the risk, man. You don't. The smartest investors and entrepreneurs like minimal risk.
Yeah, I don't see Buffett out there on speculative mining companies.
yeah, exactly. Buying penny stocks and stuff like that. Don't risk it. Minimal risk is best, and have people on your side, people on your team to advise. I don't think there's anything else to be said, really, Charlie. And thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being vulnerable enough to share your experiences. I hope everybody learned through both of our pains.
Absolutely. Honestly, I hope someone listens and some of those experiences stood out within their business and they'll do something about it.
Yeah, me too. If you guys haven't consumed any of Charlie's content yet, check out the Business of Podcasting and his Valher Media page. I'll put links to that as well. Charlie has lots of other cool things going on, so I can chuck some links in the show notes if you want to check that out as well. Also, like we said before, if you want more awesomeness from Charlie, because he's got so much of it, check out the previous episodes to this podcast where Charlie is on board as well. And guys, thanks again for listening, and I'll speak to you on the next one.